Friday, we're good to go.
Well, I thought we agreed we wasn't gonna have any formalities, we just gonna kind of discuss.
That's true.
Okay.
Well, then I'll get it started. Y'all got an email on some draft changes that I did and sent over to y'all. What you have before you is just the printed version. Because everything I did is in red, so y'all can see it, and it's got a new date on it, so it won't be confusion. I don't know if y'all, well, I guess I'll start with y'all, what chances you've had to read it, or other things that you notice, or things that you don't like.
Still think that there's a whole lot in here that is just overbearing, in my opinion.
Right, so this was the first shot based on what we talked about last week. So tell me where you're seeing.
Well, I mean, I
Next.
like I said,
No, that's not what public viewing. It's on.
Public meeting.
It's a public meeting.
But y'all are speaking here, so.
I think we, from the comments that were in here during the public meeting, a lot of people agree with doing something with the heavy industrial, that have some type of regulations there. I think both sides of that come to really see the all the extras to be necessary.
So where, are you looking at permitted uses table?
I need to go through Mark.
Okay.
I didn't print this off at home, I read it. Yeah.
I would expect you to.
The I mean, like the parts of that businesses. I mean, I just don't think we need all these extra regulations with the where you got the.
What page are you on?
I mean, like I said, I went through all of it.
Okay.
I mean, I just think that overall it's still more than what was needed.
I think what we spoke about last week when brought that sheet in there with addressing just the three areas of major concern and kind
Tore it out, that's kind of the day.
We appreciate you. Jordan.
Every
Yeah, I've
building-
got yours.
Good, I was- My twice.
So I think what Eric's saying, Tanya, is like we discussed last week, that the whole concept of zoning is not really what is acceptable for half the residents, and the other half of residents want some protection on some, high impact, right? Said and all that, right? So what, like I brought those sheets in last week, and I think you probably saw, right, which is just a real pared down. So I think what Eric's saying when we got this, of course, and those zoning are still all the.
Right, so I only addressed the few things we talked about. I didn't go through and do beyond what we talked about. So we're working in pieces. So working with the pieces we talked about, the parts that I have to actually stricken, are y'all good with that? And then we can work on the next one.
Everything that you have stricken is good. It's great.
Yeah, I think all the red was going in the right direction.
I think we're
Maybe
good.
some more red needs to come in.
Now, I added, not for this draft, but when we were talking about the special subdivisions for family exemption, I added some language, like I said, not in this, but today, just to say, in addition to standard subdivision rules or special exceptions for family. So everybody would understand subdividing by the basic rules is always allowed, But if you're doing family that meets these criteria, you get a credit.
So I think something that me and Rodney had a conversation after last week was about what was required, what's required by state law if we were to have something like this, and then what is in this document that's not required by state law.
So state is loose and tight, depending on which part you're talking about. State's gonna require you to put categories up, say what uses are allowed in which categories, and then some minimum standards for that, whether it be square footages or something like that, it kind of explains, and by definition, what each use is. So you can clearly define if it's manufacturing, what does that mean? And what type of business, if it's mechanic, that kind of thing, we have to put definitions in there to explain that. And then there's enforcements required by state law, and then appeals, of course, are required by state law. And there's 3 ways to get to some of these use categories if we decide to do business or residential or whatever. You can do straight rezoning, which is a legislative thing, and then you can do conditional zoning, so you can do these special use permits. Those are all entitled by state law.
So, and then the next thing is, in this document, it basically crosses over several things that we already have ordinances with, like heavy industrial and subdivision, right, residential subdivision. and all those other things.
Yeah, this
So,
is a bit more detailed than you usually do.
Right, give some extra items in there, design and all that.
Mhm.
So I guess, because a lot of people don't understand right off the bat, have ordinances, we have designs already, why do we got to, have more design elements and stuff like that. I think from my perspective, and, I made this note, that obviously this thing started born out of high impact use, and that's still where half the residents are, that they really don't want to, have a change of lifestyle or, the other half don't have any restrictions whatsoever, because they're fearful of that. And when my understanding, come to understand that when they say you can't tell me what I'm doing with my land, it also means what you can't tell me what I want to sell it, who I want to sell it to for the money that I'm going to sell it to down the road if I'm going to sell it. So it's that, has to be a happy medium there somewhere, right? It has to be. Yeah, I just don't think we're there yet. And we
No,
can
we're
pare
not
out-
expecting to be there.
We can pare out all but 3 pages of this thing, and
Well, 3 pages won't give you the,
right, so that's,
The
okay,
requirement.
so that's the other thing, okay? That's the other thing. I know there's a lot of talk on the administrative side of being able to have the ability to say no from the administrative side, or from the county commissioner side. Then there's also that, what we really want to curtail, not necessarily keep out, we don't keep out anything, but that's against the law too. That can't discriminate against certain things.
you can put it in different zoning classifications, you can move it around, you can get special permissions.
To talk to higher head, right, obviously.
I hear from both sides all the time, I get you.
So, oh, let's just make class 3s exempt, no class 3. They're not class 1 to class 2, right? That's that high impact side, all right? But a lot of the people that I talk to, that they don't want all the other stuff. They just want class 3. I don't know how we get there.
So what we talked about last time is we were given kind of a directive of 3 things. Let's look at large scale residential, fear of what development might come across the county line, and not to be that large development like what our county saw that they could. And then what businesses may come in response to what's going on. And then the last is highway. We talked about doing a residential agriculture district and merging the 2 districts we put in there. And then do a middle of the line, that rural business, and possibly even pulling over the ancillary businesses that would have to do with that industrial development. And then pulling over the class 1s from Hido into that, to keep it simple and a whole lot less permissions and all. Lots of people seem to be comfortable with those. And leaving the class 2s and 3s for industrial. and letting the businesses that would be ancillary to industrial or the class ones be allowed in industrial, but as well in the business. So it's not such a big zoning district kind of thing, a big jump. That's what we're trying to get to from what I understand. That's what we can, what is next? Got to talk to Jake from Stewart, and I gave him everything I've given y'all, because he can't be at the meetings, but he's still helping us. So he gave me some guidelines and maybe some stuff that can help us. He sent out some questions, and he's wanted to make sure when we have the temporary uses, which were like the Christmas tree farms and this, that, and the other, if we're taking those out, which is what I propose, we probably need to put some language in there that says we deliberately took these out and we're okay with these being in every zoning district we have. Or else they're specifically not allowed. That's how these ordinances work. If you don't mention them, then they're not allowed. So if y'all are good with that, the things that I took out, we need to specifically say, we're okay with them being everywhere. Whatever, we took out home occupations, Christmas tree thing, we took out quite a few things that would need to be some language. I've got to add that in.
Home-based businesses were one of my things early on. But I didn't want anything
So we've got to do a threshold. When do you stop home-based business to become a real business that we need to look at as commercial? Is it 10,000 square feet? Is it 20,000 square feet? Is it not square footage? Is it something else? That's where this group gets to pull that trigger and put that definition.
So what constitutes a home-based business?
One that lives on site.
Well, it's
What do you say?
something that's on
The owner lives on site.
So,
Let me riddle me this.
Mhm.
If you were sitting at your house in your underwear, attending this meeting on Zoom,
Yeah.
doing your work from it, get paid, does that constitute a home-based business? If you was able to do everything that you need to do from home, you didn't have to report to an office.
For zoning purposes, maybe.
Well, I'm just thinking about paying your bills. If that's what you do for a living, that's your job, and you do it from home. Now, and I'm not being confrontational, I'm just asking a question.
Yeah.
You got it here, so it makes it convenient to tie it together. But if you could do all of your reporting from
Right.
your house, and that's the way you paid your bill, that was your sole source of income, does that constitute a home-based business?
It probably does. And the tax laws would help you establish that because they allow you to declare your home the side of your business and deduct that from your
Okay,
income.
so we got a guy who's got a house in a subdivision. He pays his bill, he pays his homeowners association fees, he's an upstanding person as far as we know. And the way he pays his bill is right in Article 4 of publication. Okay. Now, the guy next to him has got a 3-car garage. One of the stalls in that garage, he parks his car in. The other 2, he has cars coming in and out. He changes oil, relines brakes. Is that a home-based business?
Or the next guy next to him, he's got 15 employees, it's got all the cars. Just working at his home. Is that home based?
Or he's got in his basement some old knitting machines, and he's got 4 women that come in there every morning at 7 o'clock and make socks. But I mean, this can just go on and on and on.
Right.
But I think we need to decide. I think we need to define what constitutes a home-based business.
Well, I guess I'll jump in here.
Okay, please.
I've been working from home for 18 years. And we have a home-based business at home as well. My wife is a real estate agent, it's home-based. I think the clear definition of a home-based business is it registered with the state and has an EIN. That, because other than that, it's considered a hobby. If it's not a registered business, which you don't pay taxes, et cetera. So, but to your point, a person who works from home doesn't necessarily have a home-based business. And I think that's where it gets tough because it's like, okay, well, we do need to define what is a home-based business as it relates to impact? Because a person that has a 12 by 12 room and they operate solely in that room, it's a good business, but it won't have any impact on anything around it. But to your point, if they coming in using the facility to change your oil, then it's impact. Yeah.
You're talking about what is the nuisance?
Because I mean, at the end of the day, that's what the zoning is designed to do, it's like the first thing is protect, the people, property, value, all the other kind of good stuff, however you want to word it. And so what is the nuisance with the home-based business that would make it even discussed in the zoning conversation?
So let's
And that's
maybe
probably
it's
what
up
we
to
need
me.
to kind of
If you get
say.
a, I'm sorry, you get a business in here related, could be related to like the Toyota thing.
The dog
You get
kennel.
some, like, let's say, large building up out back. It's an Amazon distribution.
Let's say a
It's
dog
just a
kennel.
building out back of somebody's house that's running the business. Where's your threshold? That's what we're gonna figure out.
So I think that's where it gets great, because if you put it in the ordinance as just plain home-based business, then it's a catch-all. It catches every home-based business under the sun, which is probably unfair.
Or do you want it to where's the nuisance that you've got outside storage, that you've got traffic coming multiple times a day that aren't like delivery truck or something? If you can work it on the nuisance side too. Because you don't really care if somebody runs a business, especially like a freelance writer, internet, a safe internet operation where they're just selling something like eBay or whatever. You don't care about those types of
Real
people.
estate or
Mhm.
tax. Okay, well, I guess what I envision, with the home-based business, Dan's point, that tax ID. It could be something like, build cabinets. Could be yarn and socks. And that you don't have necessarily walk-up traffic. I mean, think about it.
No customers.
No customers, right? Agriculture, a farm is home-based business, right? That's, that's more my criteria is that, no walk-up trade. And apartment, people coming in and all that sort of stuff. At storefront, that's not a home-based business. You don't have a storefront, I think that's more of a home-based business. Whether it's large, small, now, an Amazon type distribution center, I guess that is.
That probably goes along with the snake pit guy, but I'm just saying, there is a threshold somewhere that we've got to establish.
Right. Guy raises snakes and growing rats to feed his snakes and all that, that qualifies agriculture.
I definitely have to ask the
You know
state
what I'm
people about, yeah.
That's why
So,
this is tough.
I mean, so there you go. I consider that a home-based business, not an agriculture. Agriculture, in my mind.
So they define agriculture extensions by the state, so we can follow these
Okay,
guidelines, and there's 5 ways to do it in that main.
Right, so we're
material
talking about all
organizer.
these things, and I think that's what troubles a lot of people, this kind of need to talk about this stuff. Where's the line at? Right now, currently, we don't need to talk about that stuff. The thing that seems to be bothering people the most is, the need to talk about something that's really detrimental to, people's well-being and
So if you had an Amazon distribution, I think on Amazon, so long, but, would you want to say we'd like to decide how that gets put in?
well, okay, so on that sheet that I passed out last week,
Mhm.
breaking it down per the size of square footage
Yeah,
and
you
using
started
the
to
same criteria we do on high-dose. Okay, where you have setbacks and land space to where an entity like that would go. I don't know, I pass that Walmart distribution center every day on 4085, right? It sits backing off of Woods. I don't know who lives back there. I know it's off of, what is it? So,
But that's an industrial
That's an industrial
development area
district.
intended for those types of.
okay, all right. So we don't really have that, we never really had that need in
No, it's not good.
Smithfield, right? What is the biggest business we have down here? They get tires.
Here, don't want to.
You know, well, now the quarry, right? Quarry, right? So that's probably the biggest, largest business right now.
Square footage, right?
So when you
Dollar
say
wise,
biggest business, what defines
Big.
the size of the business?
well, then, on that sheet I passed out was based on square footage of building.
But
Now,
the structure they put on the property.
Structure. is
But the
different.
structure of the quarry is that big.
That is true. That is true. That's a high. That's not high. No, we're talking, because in Alamance County, there's nothing to address in any of our ordinances, any commercial, right, except for the floodplain. That's the only thing. That's
Floodplain
commercial.
watershed's only thing. I-
That's right, that's right. So there's no continuity there to design anything for commercial.
No, and neither of those talk about square footage. You're talking about impervious surface on those, so that's not.
So, yeah, is there a need for that? That's list, and I know there's, probably some desire not for some of the farmers not to have large subdivisions, or potential conflicts of operations of their agricultural industry and residential. So,
So we gotta define large. then.
right, and I don't know, I put some guidelines and just some talking points last week, and I don't know.
You
if
started at
anybody's-
25.
Right, so I don't know if anybody's thought more about that. But I know a lot of people get, the heartburn comes from all this minor talk that we have about what this is, and all these.
Sometimes you have to have that to get to the spot you need to be, that's all. That's how the home occupation seem to let somebody do what they want to, but where do you stop home occupation and it starts actual commercial business? So that's all we have to kind of figure out. Seems simple. What do y'all think? Do y'all have this information from last week, the 10,000 square foot and all that? It's a start talking.
And do we put it in the form of zoning ordinance, or do we put it in the form of a development ordinance, sort of like a highway? Yeah, so yeah, or land use or whatever it's gonna be called. But again, then what's our legal ramifications on that? I know 160D brought a lot of development stuff from the state. Does that affect
It
us?
attempted to combine and help us in parts and areas. The problem is just writing an ordinance, which is what brought you to, we've been really good at that for a long time. You don't have any powers to say, yes, we want it there, no, we don't. We give it technical requirements. If you meet the technical requirements, you can. So if we got Amazon distribution beside one of our big farms, we couldn't even about, or beside one of the neighborhoods. I mean, I've got some people right now that are very unhappy with something that's being proposed to come in beside them. It's residential, but it's a very different residential, and we don't have any way of doing anything for them. That's what we were hearing, that people wanted to be able to make decisions on. And with just on the ordinances, short of an actual land use ordinance, it gives you decision-making abilities. You come short on that. You have lots of additional requirements. Not what you want your iPhone to.
So is there not a way to have a power to say no? Like the people can have a voice when heavy industrial or something comes in.
With this, yes.
But do we need all 67? Can we
No,
just
we'll
do
probably
it?
need a whole lot.
Is
lighter.
this at that meeting for me on last month's planning board meeting, when we had both rooms full? Or I don't know how many were in the other room, but I think what was profound for me is we heard support of, and then we heard those that were against it. But when I think it was Mr. Willoughby posed the question, the common ground was the heavy industrial. So I don't see, I guess I'm struggling with that, because when I'm hearing the people from Snow Camp don't want all this. So I'm just curious why. I mean, I get like home-based businesses and things like that, but I don't think that's what Snow Camp, I don't think
That's
those are
not the
issues.
problem.
Yeah,
That's
I
not
don't think
the
that's what
issue.
we, so I don't think that's, I just don't think this is what we need And I just think that word zoning is just, I just struggle with that.
But
And I
now
s-
you
you
just
know,
can't change the name.
But we can't make it sound pretty, but still do the same thing. I mean, we gotta get away, I mean, we gotta find a way to protect the people in Snow Camp without restricting the people in Snow Camp.
Yeah, I think that's what we landed on, is because what we found out was that the
On
only way.
this,
Mhm.
the 67
Meaning why-
pages?
No,
No.
meaning why the striking started
Gotcha, okay.
was because I think we got the answer that the only way to actually have a decision making and say yes or no is with some form of this. Without it, every resident in Snow Camp can say no, including every resident that's not in Snow Camp, and it still will have to be approved because they hit all the check marks. And that's a problem for me, because if I live, which I don't, I live north of Snow Camp, and every resident said they didn't want that to come here, but we still allow it as a county to happen, then we're doing the citizens a disjustice. Because it's like, we're supposed to be here to protect them too, and if they didn't want it, that's why it makes it tough, because, you know, what do we do? Right now, there's zero way to stop it. We have criteria that these heavy industries must meet, but we can't stop it. So if they hit the criteria, we can change the buffer to, 200 yards from the next residential property. And all they have to do is build a building 200 yards from the property, and we have to say yes. So I think that's where it gets weird, because nobody wants to be told what they can and cannot do. But at the same token, it seems like we have a duty to at least listen to the residents on the other side too, meaning like if they say they don't want something, and we say we can't stop it, it's gonna go there. I think we're still not listening to them. That's what makes it tough. Because I was hoping that we could go without zoning and just beef up the HIDO, and then we'll be good. But we got that definitive answer last meeting that even if we beefed up the HIDO, it doesn't have a way for us to say no. It would just mean that there will have to be a review. But just like when we read in other zoning meetings, planning meetings, did it meet this? Did it meet that? Did it meet that? The answer is yes. You can't vote against it. That's where it gets tough. But I think we're in the right start. Keep lining through until we get to where maybe it's super light, but at least we can stop something that the residents don't want, or at least have an option.
Can't make like special use permit.
Well, even the special use permits, if they hit the criteria, the county commission's got to approve it.
All people,
So they publish
So with, Ray had brought up, there was a catch. Higher detail, right?
So the lawyers have evaluated this verbiage of explaining of how to detail, and this is absolutely, we absolutely cannot do that. We've got to follow what would be state law, and because Hideaway veto is bypassing the basic laws of permissions and the legislative decision of a zoning district. If you like it, you don't like it in that spot, you just make permission to rezone to a district or not. And that's surpassing all the basic understandings of how 160D is written. The idea, the very large concept, yes, give us a HIDO with some language in it like a guide that gives you gotta rezone industrial and you've got to ask for a special use permit. Special use permits are quasi judicial hearings like the garage variance. And then whatever you're approving exactly what they've drawn on the paper. If they want to change that, they can come back and ask for another special use permit. Those things are true and factual. So I guess there's a version kind of like a veto, but not exactly like HIDO. And I don't get the feeling, when I'm hearing from y'all, HIDO and given multiple steps to get what you want on these heavy industrial uses, we're good. Everybody feels comfortable with, that's okay to leave it.
Yeah, I think that's.
So that we have a agreement on.
Large, there's probably a large group that, too, not maybe all, not even maybe most, but there's some that one would like to see no class threes, right? They are, so. I don't know if there's abilities to do that. I think that was broached at some point. What was the definitive answer?
Well, there really isn't a great definitive answers. The lawyers are less comfortable with that than just putting them through a much harder approval process.
With some more than David Owen said, pretty much same thing there.
That's smart dude. He is the godfather.
Yeah.
He's been here, y'all. And he's great. So I'm walking away right now going, we are good with this section of the ordinance, the higher part. The question is, do we break class ones away or we don't? I'm not sure anybody, any love for either way, quite frankly, or hate.
I mean, you're saying the higher part, which part of this are you?
All the heavy industrial uses, class 1, 2, 3.
This document, or where is it in this?
It's on the 14. That breaks out all your classes and we put them in, that's only in the industrial zone. But the key that says permitted, referring to section 6.5. But I believe what I'm hearing, some of these landfills and asphalt plant, they have an S, so it's a special use permit, which requires both rezoning and going for that second use for all the class 3s. Except for the electricity generating facilities. We did those as permitted, straight permitted. We can check that.
What do you got on here where you got sawmills? What regulates a sawmill?
They're defined in what she's got in that.
Permanent commercial establishment engaged in sawing dimension lumber, boards, beams, timbers, poles, ties, shingles, shake, siding, and wood chips from logs or bolts. They may also plane the rough lumber that they make with a planing machine to achieve smoothness and uniformity of size. Temporary or portable sawmills without permanent structures are excluded from the definition.
So Edwards, Braxton,
Braxton's.
right, so that would be sawmill. That's what.
So if another sawmill wanted to come in, if Jordan Lumber Company decides they were gonna come up here from Troy, what does Jordan, what's the steps that Jordan Lumber would follow?
So we're following this ordinance and they found a piece of land that's just like agricultural, residential, wherever. They come to the planning department, put an application in, ask for that property to be rezoned. Once that process happens and it goes through, that's strictly a legislative decision of planning board gets to talk about it and give a recommendation to board of commissioners say, actually, we're okay with that, that feels good. Let's go ahead and move forward. All right, so they get that piece. And then they come in for what we're calling a special use permit, and they've drawn out exactly what they actually want to do. That again comes through y'all. They have to meet all what requirements we have in here, the height of requirements of setbacks and all that for staff to review. They come to y'all make a recommendation, and then the.
So if it gets turned down by the planning board, is it dead?
No, that's just a recommendation. It goes to commissioners with their recommendation or denial. They get to make the final decision.
And they can say no.
They can say no.
And it can be appealed in court.
Yeah, if they say no for the wrong reasons, it can be appealed to court.
But it's still, so.
Or if they say yes, the neighbors can appeal.
That
It can
front
go-
step, is just asking permission to use that land if it next to your farm. Okay. And it's that farm. Okay. Second step is something we already have. That's the HIDO in the UDO.
Except for it's not a permission.
Right. It's just objectives.
Right.
You know, we do special use permit. That's what-
And that's the part we kept hearing, that citizens want to be able to have a public hearing that matters what they say. Because at this point, there is a public hearing, but it's all technical and there's no way anybody can say no anyway. It's just letting it be known to the public, not actually when they have a say.
Notification. What if, say, Jeff Edwards would probably want to go in and they wanted to add on to an existing mill that's already there. And they bought up some land, if they buy up the land that's around them, and they want to add on to their operation that's already there.
So they're not expanding on the land they already have. They're actually gonna buy something new. They would have to go through that process. Because
Even
unless
if
that
it's
land,
adjoining land.
Right, if they don't already have it zoned correctly, then they were buying it, then they gotta get the right zoning district and then ask for the use that they want actually. use.
My problem with Edwards and Canfor, New South, they employ a lot of people in the southern part of county. And those are good paying jobs. I mean, a lot of those guys make good money. And I have a problem making it harder on somebody to do business that's already doing business. And you know, I mean, that business is already there. You know, if they bring in another, like Edwards, they went to Liberty and bought another drying operation. Well, they need to expand that drying operation at the mill instead of having down, they're having to truck lumber 7 miles up the road. Which is really, I mean, that's what they could do at the time. But if they buy another tract of land and they put that drying operation right there at the sawmill where they can take it over there with a forklift instead of taking it over there, putting it on a truck and loading it, and then taking it to up the road 7 miles, unloading it, drying it, putting it back on the truck, and carrying it to wherever the final destination is. I mean, it saves them a lot of money as a company, but it also creates a lot of jobs.
And that was one of the things that I talked to Tanya about. Coming after some of these drafts are coming through with zoning map. Now on Edwards, they're sitting on a parcel that was in the zoning map. I guess their area of operation was called purple. But the rest of right, so the rest of the property that they were sitting on was called green.
And that's nobody's law that creates that. We can make that decision and we go ahead and
So there's
keep their
property
whole
behind there.
parcel in the same zoning or whomever's, or do you only actually cover the part they're operating on? That's a discretionary decision on the board.
So if they have that piece and they own that piece, that's okay on that map, that part was purple, part was green, and they wanted to expand. They had to ask for permission to go rezoning on that piece of property they already own.
By that map, yeah,
Okay.
but you're not stuck to that map. That's kind of,
Okay, that was just not
we
clear
just
enough.
covered the absolute bare minimum, because that's what we heard.
Okay.
We don't want to go expanding without permission.
We
but then you gotta
discussed that
go
earlier
specific.
there, it's property too.
Yeah.
Where the garage was. Couple of gates there. So then you really what numbers was.
Yeah, because we talked about that a lot through the steering committee section of what we can do either way, and it leaned more, it seemed like you're just covering the part they're actually using. Like I said, the law doesn't require that. That's something that the county and the board's here to make that decision.
On the other side of the coin is right now, all they have to do is ask to expand their song. They don't go through a request for that property. We just go with it. Which for a permitted,
They bring the application for higher test.
comes to us. We recommend, see how they do it.
Well, it's like, y'all remember
Expand, do they have to go by a new height or one that they permitted?
at the time of application, whatever the current ordinance is, that's what you're saying. You remember the guy we deal with the debris landfill? Can't remember his name. Rodney, you probably remember. That one. I'm thinking Philip, oh, that's not quite right. Philip. So he had the front part that he had already gotten approved in like 2016 for hire. And then he needed to do the back part. So he came before y'all to get the back part straight through hire. And now he's got all of his property.
And I thought it would have been the right thing to do to let him expand based on the whole height of it, right? Then we went through that discussion, right?
Because he had never put that on application before, it was new application, he had meeting that. He made it through, he's been
Did you get through the same?
that bird. I know he's still picking up for relatives, I guess he's all right, because he was about out of his face. So on here, we're not good with fire, but we are good with fire. Because when we talk about these small sawmills, they're permitted in industrial area without a special permit. That means you just get the rezoning and you go ahead and submit to us for site plan and make sure you make the dimension stuff.
The one that sheet, also I had that items would be requiring a special use permit I think I had that verbiage on there as a talking point.
To possible
I
extra.
don't know. if you can do that without the zoning.
So it lives without the county commission,
Yeah,
Oh,
all of it.
that's state statute or state law. Looks at it.
Is there already an industrial and residential and business zoning map already set for Spokane? I mean, like
There's
the
a
map I
proposed-
seen, and I'm going, and I know this area better than most areas, so, yeah, is right there, and I'm gonna say 4,005. Snow Camp Road, Greenville, Sheffield, or stores, post office. You know, the map I seen, you got purple. Down there where Eric's at, purple. And it's, you know, agriculture and residential in between. Is that map already set in place?
Yeah, that's a proposal.
Okay. So there's nothing there now that says if he wanted to expand his tire business, he can or can't
Right.
without it. All right.
Yeah, there's never been a map, so there's nothing against that. They're changed too, as you
I
know.
got confused there for a bit because I thought y'all was talking about, okay, there is already one there.
yeah, it was still draft. It was in the draft.
Yeah, okay, all right.
And the map is required by state law to
Right.
do that. We went through, and part of the process is we had to go through and update that land development plan because the state requires you to have a semi-current plan before you can write anything that regulates it.
With the height of the telecommunications facility. This highlighted yellow, was there an issue there?
What page are you on?
16.
Oh, no, I highlighted that to make the change to, it's not in the heavy industrial development, it's in a different section in the high, or the UDO. That we had a standing, already existing, telecommunication ordinance that met state law that we brought into the UDO. It has nothing to do with the highway. But I did hear from y'all last time, if it's something that's already in the UDO, not including here. But the purpose of this is to say, telecommunication facilities need special permissions to be near your house, and it also says for industrial, if we agree with that. That's why that's in there, so if somebody wanted to put a cell tower in that lives right beside you, it'd be great to get people to allow inputs. Right now, the telecommunication facility, you're actually gonna see one, they do have to come before you for permission, but it's like, hi, they meet on all technical guidelines, and y'all say, yeah, we agree to, the commissioner say, yeah, we agree to, nobody can say no. But that's why they're.
But if the commissioners don't, is
Commissioners
it
don't,
dead at that?
they can deny it based on there's a technical piece that they think is missing. And then somebody can come back, correct whatever that technical piece is in the effort. There's really no way to kill it.
Yeah, right.
But they don't get to say no if the people come out and say, we don't want it. And the only way to get that, to have that permission is to do some type of zoning.
That's the only way state law enables us to do it.
Or the state law say that, what is the minimum that state law requires to have for class 3?
That's the gray area. They don't really say that. They say you have to establish a decision-making process. You have to establish an enforcement process and an appeal process. And we're going to tell you how those are supposed to work, what your minimums of like penalties and where you have to go for appeals to court thing. That's where it gets more gray.
But does it tell us what has to be in the zoning of the ordinance?
Not clearly.
So we don't have to have all this in the ordinance. We just have to have those 3 steps that we mentioned.
You gotta have the decision-making process in this
Decision-making.
time. And then you have to have the enforcement of it and the appeal of it,
Decision-making enforcement.
which means that you have to establish the district, how you get to the district, what you're allowing in the district, so then you're able to give permission for or not for something.
All that then is what you're saying is the first 5, 6, 7 pages is all that stuff.
A lot of that's what I call legalese, yeah. That's stuff that we're required to cover in some way, shape, or form. It's like that 5.3.3 on page 6 at quasi judicial, that covers your, I want to vary from what you're asking for, setback wise or something, I want a variance. Or the quasi judicial covers special use permits, kind of thing.
We have a lot of that in the UDO right now. It just,
But you have to define it in this section because special use permit is specifically called out here, and we don't have a special use permit in no part of the ordinance.
I think I brought up pulling out the, what was already written, because it would cut it down at least 10 more pages.
I don't.
And so I thought we could put a line dash CUDO. But I guess it has to be spelled out versus CUDO.
Some of it does. Now, some of it you saw pulled out, like the RV parks and there's a couple different things I pulled out because we do have that reference in the law. It's not requiring me to mention it twice. Now, when the legal gets all of this, they might tell me you need to put it back in, but for now, maybe not.
So I think that was part of the stuff we heard too from the residents. There were things that was mentioned that some of the residents thought was put in here, but the reality was it was already listed in the UDO. And so when it was seen in here and brought up, it was like, well, where did this come from? But actually it came from the UDO, not something that was added to this document. So my thought was, well, if we took it out of here, then it would be crystal clear that it's not something that this board came up with. Per se, this is something that was already approved in 20, whatever it was when the UDO was last updated. And I think that's the education component that I think we probably could help the residents know that this is not anything new, but this particular document here, this is the new stuff. So it's clear what's new versus what maybe we need to revisit the UDO, periodic revisions like we talked about last time. Which it's a living document, so we should be able to get to that point as well. But I think that's the biggest thing. I was just curious about. We need to make sure it's clear what is new versus what is existing.
then this comes down to me then, that a lot of this document is, do we need it, do we want the county commissioners that have that ability to say no, or they meet all the checklists? That seems to me that's the, it's either this or that, and that's very.
That's right. That's my understanding too.
But to stop it, just when you're about to check off, you gotta have some kind of, something.
Yeah, as our ordinances are written, Patrick had talked to you a little bit one of these. As we're written, we're up against the very best we can do without creating some type of.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what I'm hearing. We're gonna have some type of discrimination here. And we have for years asked the question to all different people, what is discrimination? And the answer to that question is just like major surgery. What is major surgery? Anybody know?
Well, it's defined.
Yeah, and the definition is when they're cutting on meat. That's
On
major
you,
surgery.
that's major.
Now, they can do a brain transplant on Bill and I'm
Yeah.
gonna pay for it. But if I get 3 stitches in my finger, that's major surgery. Discrimination is the same way when it's me. So we are either getting ready to discriminate against the people in Alamance County and tell them to a point how they can and cannot use their property, particularly when it comes to selling, like you see. Somebody comes in here, big tract of land, I want to do X. And whoever owns land get ready to cash in. Nope, you can't do that because they can't do what they want to, and they ain't gonna pay your price if they can. Or we're gonna turn around the other way and discriminate against the person who wants to do that, say, don't bring your money here. We'd rather pay extra taxes to keep the county going. We don't want this business to bring the money. Now, that's about as pragmatic as I see it.
I offer a C. Or C. You're gonna have to go through some extra steps if you want that. I mean, that's probably the biggest piece of it. So it's, you can buy it. But if you want to build what you say you want to build, you're gonna have to go through some extra steps. And there's a possibility that there may be a no. But there's a possibility there, yeah.
So the guy who wants to sell the land, in all likelihood, the guy with real deep pockets ain't gonna gamble on that level.
Gonna get the homeowner, to go try to get it rezoned before. he
Which
dies.
that's already in place now, to my understanding. When I did a little more research, that purchase of properties, and I'm not a real estate agent on that thing, but it can be conditional. So meaning like if you're gonna buy the 100 acres and build a certain business, but you know it's gonna require a zoning. Well, let's take I go back to my house. How about that? Behind me, the developer wanted to buy that tract of land and build 400 units. But in order to do that, it had to be rezoned and annexed. So the conditional piece to the land seller was, if those things are approved, I buy that land from you. Here it is on black and white, signed on the dotted line. If it's a no, then you can keep your land. So I know that's already currently in place, that there's conditions that can be placed upon sales that including zoning or whatnot. But correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're right, that happens a lot.
But not in the county.
Not county, in
So
general.
not in
Well,
our county, not in-
Well, this
Yeah,
happened
you
in
have
the
to do-
county, but what had to happen was they had to annex it,
Yeah.
they had to annex it first.
Right.
So it was a two-step process, which is how my street is in the county, but right behind it is in the city. How that
So
happened.
the
I don't
city
know.
made those regulations, yeah.
Right.
Well, they probably want to see services, some water, sewer, or something,
Yeah.
and that's the city's conditions.
Yeah, so I guess if you think about it in the county, the same sort of thing would happen. Well, it wouldn't happen if there's no zone. Because it wouldn't be a need.
Right.
But if there was zone, then the same sort of process would have to happen. Which I'm sure will follow the same process. If it's zoned or the zone is changed, I could buy land. If not, you can keep it. That's- To your point, I mean, that's the way I look at it. At the end of the day, it boils down to two things. Do we want to, or are the residents okay with, even if all residents in Snow Camp doesn't want a particular business to come in, and they say no, because if it's heavy industry, there's a public forum, but it's really a notification. I'm telling you what's coming in. It's not necessary for me to hear if you like it or not. At the end of the day is what I'm hearing. All the residents okay with that scenario, that they can't, there's no way to stop it, even if every resident signed a petition saying no. And if they're not, then it has to be some form of this, whether it's 3 pages or 37 pages. And that's where we're at, crossroads.
So I guess, come back to one of the original, what is the absolute minimum? State law, gotta be in that document. Absolute minimum that we need to worry about.
So you have to establish your zoning districts, you have to establish the uses and what districts you're allowing or not allowing them in. And you've got to establish that decision-making process. And the appeals process and enforcement process, and then the front part, the administrative part of how you actually apply for something. And if you want the additional any landscaping or whatever, like we've done in the Haida, fences, drawing, blah, 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 those aren't required, but that's allowed. You have to establish the use table, the districts they're in, and how you get to those uses. So when you say manufacturing, you've got to define what manufacturing is. And like the sawmill, what's the sawmill? We got to define. Those kind of things have to be established. Now, if we get to a point where we really just want legal to talk to us about what these are, we can invite from the lawyers to sit with us on the meetings to break that down. But I'd like to give them a fair chance and let them know what types of questions like that we'll be asking. So they've done the research when they get here and it's not for them.
Does all the enforcement out of this come through your office?
This is already in place, right? The audit.
It's in the UM.
So is there a way to take this piece of it, give it these parameters to a minimum? it mirrors this and leaves out all the other stuff.
Yes, but you've got to establish the thresholds. Like we said, we gotta define what distance equals what. We've got,
But we're always
That's on
gonna
page-
focus on heavy industrial stuff, right?
that's on page 14, the class 1, 2, 3s.
Mhm.
What district do we want to establish for then? Are we gonna establish different districts per class or not? Those things have to be done. And then there has to be a map associated with that. So everything else stays no color. And then whatever we decide to put these in goes to a color, and then we color the whole parcel. Or existing industrial, we color the whole parcel, only the part we're actually using. What we do, so there's some pieces even to that that we have to figure out. Yes, I've got to figure out which I want me to prepare. I know next week is planning board meeting, so I don't know if y'all want to do anything next week.
I think the intent was to have something ready to take to that meeting.
Well, I think
Obviously, I don't think we're there, but
we weren't, I don't think we were truly planning to be there, I'll be honest. I think that was very optimistic, we only had 2 meetings. But we are gonna, planning board meeting's going down to the little courthouse next week. Just so we had overflow and stuff, that it puts everybody in one room that way. We can have the discussion that y'all are talking about and working through some of these things. But eventually, we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna move forward with. And now the 20th, I think it's February 20th, the next commissioners meeting, after the morning meeting, they're going to entertain extending the moratorium to give it 3 more months. I think that puts it in May, because the expiration is February 28th. So between now and then, you really don't get all that time because it's still going to go to the board of commissioners, but that gives y'all some time to work on this more too. You don't have to make any hurry decisions, just timely decisions.
Should we do a kind of a consensus around the horn here to see where we are tonight? Everybody want to do that?
Sure, I know that, the document I produced last week have just addressing those 3 areas at whatever scale, whether that goes into an ordinance or that has to go to, we wanted to go. So I guess probably the first thing you guys establish is, do we want this with that ability for the county commissioners to say no? Or let them go through the same process we always have, it meets the design criteria, they rubber stamp it, it's like, we do, or whatever. So that's the first question I think we need to answer, right?
Yeah, I think that's,
Establish whether
That's
we're
a
gonna
good
go.
one.
I think that's, I think that's what polling the room, what we're talking about, right?
That's kind of where I'm.
And that's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'll be the first to jump out there. I have a hard time swallowing that if every resident said no to something, the commissioners have to say yes. If they've been living there all their lives in some cases, and if every resident said no, the current way, it don't matter what you think. They hit the criteria, the commissioners have to say yes. I think that's a problem for me, but that's just me personally, that's just where I feel. I don't like that the residents have 0 input. Now granted, in these type discussions won't even happen if you think about it. The residents can tell us, we don't want zoning, but in that process, they wouldn't even have any input at all. Wouldn't be a need for a public forum for us to know, or for the county commissioners to know that we don't want that here. Because they wouldn't have their hands would be tied. I just don't like that, you live here, you have no say. That's why I think that even with this, my personal opinion is strip it down to the bare bones, and then whatever we add to it, let the residents tell us and direct us what to add.
That's my question. When you say bare bones, what does that mean? 'Cause that's what I'm here to try to figure out what y'all want.
So like, when I say bare bones, it means that we keep the heavy part in there, and then the other criteria, so there's a map of some sort that will ensure that there's at least the heavy industry part in there. But all the other stuff as far as telling the lot sizes, can you subdivide, can you do all those type of things, take all that out for now, until the residents say, yeah, we're tired of seeing this in our town.
So now the subdivision part, there's a proposed change of lot size in here, but generally that's already in the UDO. How you subdivide, what you can do, your minimum lot sizes, the width of your lots, that kind of thing. So there is language already in the regular ordinance.
Right.
We're strip
Right.
that out. That's not being proposed.
Right, so that's something, so like whatever's in the UDO, that's staying, unless we want to take a relook at that some later date.
It will need a relook, because some of that stuff's old. Now, I'm trying to look at this piece.
So some of what's in this is already ordinance.
A little bit of it,
Yeah, like the
less and less of
subdivision-
it, yeah.
Subdivision ordinance, the IO ordinance, yeah. We talk about the telecommunications, 6.11 for this.
Yeah, oh my God, you know, I do.
Yeah, that's something for
What
you.
I've heard,
That's something
for
for
me,
you.
but I've never looked into. Or had to look into that.
And that just came about because, again, that 160D,
State law change.
state law change where she had to combine a lot of the ordinances within our county that dealt with land use into a unified development ordinance. That's what we passed last year.
It was that or take 60 different ordinances, which before the boards, and that just is all kicked off.
That's when we say about the UDO, that's where that all, there's sections already established.
So yeah, it really didn't change anything. That's the thing. UDO didn't change anything. It just brought them all in one spot. Whether they're good, bad, different, they just all came in one spot.
What about the mixed use? So I know that the distinction that we have now is
President,
residential,
Yeah.
industrial, and so forth. Is there another class where it can be, mixed use? Want to?
what kind of mix do you want?
So like, let's just say,
We can make.
meaning like, I guess, if we look at residential as an example. Rural residential and rural business. Because it's not industrial, it'll prevent them from having to go through so many extra steps if they would say, hey, I'm a rural resident, I want to make a little small business. But if it's mixed, then I can do either of those without having to go through not redistricting, but rezoning.
So what they were talking about was mixing the ag and rural residential together. And then letting a business and a industrial stand alone, but the business was where we were having to find what is,
A business.
what fits in that category, or what might fit in the ag or residential that we mix small.
Yeah, because now this sentence or this part of the sentence, where it says does not interfere with surrounding residents. I think that's subjective, because one may think it interferes and another person may say it doesn't interfere.
That, what, you're in R1,
I'm on 8, looking at just the zoning district as a whole, so you think about the map itself, if there was mixed zoning, so like you could, if most of the map allow basically A, B, and C. Without any change in zoning, et cetera. The only time you had to change zonings is if you were trying to do an industrial business somewhere in the county.
So-
Is there such thing as that?
well, we call that blanket zoning. You take and pick out the ones that you want to make an exception to, which would be industrial, and your blanket zone everybody else.
Is that legal for one?
Yeah,
Because the reason why I asked, because
it's probably not good planning.
Right.
That's
For
where I
now.
come from, but it is legal.
The reason why I asked that, because that allowed residents to do what they want to do with their land, except still a heavy industry.
It will. Part of what we were told though was that the people wanted us to look at the businesses that were coming in from Toyota, and that would allow them, unless you do them all industrial, allow them to come in right beside residential, if that's a concern.
But they would
That
have
came
to
from
apply
some
for rezoning if Toyota came in, because that would be, I guess, depending on size plant. I mean, that would be heavy.
Well, not Toyota, but like the businesses that would go along with. some kind of ancillary. And it could be that you can leave them blanket zone, and if they want to do something 10,000 square feet or larger or something, you give them a special use permit within that zoning district. They're already zoned there, they just get an extra permission.
Because part two, I look at like that may be a starting point. Because it still will not restrict the residents from selling to who they want to, doing what they want to, and we build from this. You know what I mean? So it still
Yeah,
have
it depends on what
zoning.
y'all want,
Build from this.
because of what y'all want to cover in this. If it's just industrial, heavy industrial, light industrial, whatever we want to call that, then what you're saying works. And you don't actually have to zone everybody else, you could just zone the ones that are industrial. You don't have to do the blanket one, but if you choose to, you can.
But if you don't zone, like you like it zone, then wouldn't that open up to the scenario that we were talking about? So if they wanted to do a business next to, there wouldn't be anything to stop it, or would that?
That's right, but if you blanket zone everybody, and you already allow those businesses in those zoning districts anyway, you've already given them permission. They don't have to ask any special permission to already in the zoning district. Unless you give them a special use permit or something, say if you want a business in this, but then you might as well. Not then you might as well rezone.
With the exception of industrial, right?
Right.
So they'll have a blanket zoning, they can do anything they want to with the exception of industrial.
Yeah, and if you break it out into just a business district to go to, a rezoning is a simpler, easier process for somebody than what a special use permit would be. If you wanted to do the blanket zoning, you want to give businesses a special way or a limit on, you can build 9,999 square feet, but when you get to 10,000 square foot, then you gotta get some special permissions. That's a harder process and a very lawyer, legal process, that special use permit, whereas if you put a different zoning district in there, they could go to, it's an easier process to allow the bigger business.
The challenge with that is if you define what side town we're gonna say you can do the industry and what side you can't. Which is planning, I know. It's
Well, industry
oxymoron,
we're
but-
covered, we want special permissions. And we can blanket zone everybody and allow what's there, and then any new stuff, put a business district in that people rezone to, but we don't currently have anybody zone that way because everybody's good. But for the people like that have their businesses down already and they want to expand or buy more land, they would fall into that new business or maybe there's industrial, they have to rezone. It's a lot to think about, where the lines start. I mean, I can write an ordinance based on what you have written for us. And if that's what y'all want to do, put that language together, I can do that and see what it looks like. Or if we think some of this is really,
Based on this.
now, we've got some residential development tiers down here. I don't know, we briefly talked about that. So I don't know where everybody stands on it.
And basically, those talking points I put out there was just land spacing and setbacks. If residential development wanted to come in and they were going to build 50 homes, but they still have to go to the 6.7. I think it's 6.7.
Subdivision regulations, yeah.
Subdivision regulations. So they still have to do that. And then they use setbacks and land spacing like we do in the Idaho. They meet that criteria, so that it comes down back to, do you want the commissioners to have that right to say yay or nay? So that's either zoning or just an ordinance. One of the other. Still that basic question.
And that's what's going to become zoning districts.
Keep my answer. What say the remaining ones? As far as what they're leaning towards.
Like I
No
said,
decision.
I think there's a lot in here that we can get, that I think we need to get rid of. I mean, I know whenever this sort of started first coming about, it was all about preserving the green space. And, you know, if you, I think to do what both sides of the room wanted to do that night, they wanted more protection for the farms that are the already existing farms. And they don't want to make it harder for any existing businesses that are there. And that's, I mean, and like I said, if they want to make it like more restrictive on the class threes, and I think that's something everybody agrees on.
I think that's all I've heard is
Yeah.
more restrictions on class three.
Right. And-
Because we know they're gonna try to come
Yeah. And
as close as Toledo's gonna be, and with that water and sewer coming down. Liberty.
I understand where you're coming from, but I mean, I don't particularly think the snow camp is there. We don't have the infrastructure there.
It's in the back door.
I
bet you, I'm
I
just-
get that, I mean,
Yeah.
but, I mean,
Seen 3
So
years.
you're in favor of no. I don't want to put word here, so you're in favor of not having this.
it makes me a little scared that county commissioners can say, yeah, or nay, to anything that comes in.
So we've got to do some kind of
And
zoning.
if
To make it
underhanded
work.
business deals get done, then, you know,
Good point.
it is what it is.
So there's gotta be some kind of, it don't have to be all this.
Right, and I'm.
It can be
like I
this
said, I
and a
think-
little
I
bit
think
of
that both
this.
sides of that room that night can meet in the middle. The heavy
I think
industrial.
county commissioner, a business that is gonna be beneficial for the county. Job, whatever. Supply more taxes. They're not gonna say no. They're gonna say yes every time.
You gotta have jobs.
That's right.
So that's where the factors do come in at.
Discuss taxes from us.
Well, the county way is go up on the land, go up on the property, and
You can't have that.
Yeah.
So this is what happens.
tired of being that.
Well, last week, I shared, as a matter of fact, that I had read every page and every word on every page of the original draft ordinance. And I read it at the table at the house with a box of crayons. And it's right here, if y'all want to look through it, you can. There's some pages that don't have any marks on, but there's some that look like a map. And what Tanya has given us tonight has got a very similar look to mine, with the minor exception of a lot of her stuff is red. Not everything that I marked was red. So I'm compelled to say, let's just dispense with zoning right now and see if we can't work with this proposed ordinance language and legal and see where we get to.
You mean dispense with zoning ordinance?
Well, all of this proposed ordinance has got zoning in it. And I think, based on my reading, I have not read the new one. I ain't had it long enough to have read it.
I didn't print it out, but it's hard to read on the computer. And I'm not tech savvy.
Get that big screen that,
I
yeah.
need a projector before it's up.
Yeah, but it's hard to, I mean, this it's hard to digest. For me, it is, I'm gonna be honest with you, you
Don't
gotta,
read
you
it
gotta
all.
sit down and
I'd read
take
some
time
three,
to
four
study.
times.
That ain't, this is not something you sit here and read for an hour and understand it.
And you're going, okay, what did I just read?
I can't do it.
What did I just read?
I mean, you really, that's right. I mean, I really have to sit down and read it word for word, read it again and figure it out.
And you probably, like me, need a little bit of solitude when you do it.
Yeah, you can do
You
it.
don't need 3 customers standing in front of you. A couple of helpers wanting to know which tire to go on what tractor.
That's right.
So that in itself gets back to the original, this is volunteer work. And we got to work this in where we can. You only got 15 hours overtime this week so
That's
far?
only 15 this week.
Okay. And of course, Sandy told us that, her appointment canceled and her, so she just got time out of the wazoo to do all this. She's smart, she can read fast, and that's great.
Just happened to be early.
But, so I guess I want to make sure I understand. So when you say go out the zone, and what was the other option, I guess?
take
Work with.
Bill's proposal.
Really focus it
on
on
this.
the other
Right.
class three.
So we do this would be, in order for it to have a decision, I thought we heard that it had to have the zoning components attached to it, which it would be. the
Take
new
this
zoning.
one.
That is exactly right. If we got to either have zoning or we don't.
Right.
And even if we can water this down as much as you want to. But if we recommend to the county commissioners and they implement zoning, then we got zoning. And I'm gonna use an analogy here, Tanya, I don't want you to get this wrong,
That's right.
but I'm gonna use an analogy. If you walking out across the field and a copperhead snake strikes at you and just breaks the skin a little bit and gets some poison in there, it's in there. Now, if you can keep away from it, and he's just swatting in the air, and if you can manage to get your foot or a stick or something on the back of his head and get them fangs out and do like this right here till it stops, he's pretty defenseless in. But once he breaks the skin, you're subject to the ramifications of that.
So I guess, wouldn't that be zoning though? If we took this document, add the components that's required, and it'd just be a new version of this,
If
but it would be zoning.
if we put zoning in there so that the county commissioners can say, we don't want you here, the people have spoken, go jump the river. And that's where we are.
Right, so
Now, that's my understanding.
So, can you put together both sides of this scenario? Something, one of the lines that I've written up there. How, if you were going to write that as a zoning, or if you were going to write that as one of our normal ordinances. Kind of give us a draft on either way that we can look at.
Some of it. So the business thing, that's gonna have to be a zoning, that's not a not zoning option for business houses. The home site stuff, I could put that in, what would be the subdivision section of the UDO, or we could put it into Vido is something we already got, so it'd only be a zoning option. But I could take this and regurgitate it into some language that would fit somewhere. It might be on its own piece right now on paper before we put it in this, so we know which way we're going and how it fits kind of thing. But we can get something drafted up to show what this looks like in applicable.
And what are the limitations if it's an ordinance versus its own?
There's no decision making. They're very, all they are is technical.
Let me give you time to look at what you're giving the county commissioners to say, or not the county commissioners. to say. See that document. All you're gonna look at then is a document she'll produce that will say, okay, this document gives the county commissioners the right to say yay or nay. This document is a design ordinance, design elements, and criteria. And I didn't say approve it doesn't mean everything.
That would be current world scenario.
That's a critical scenario.
When I see land spacing on the commercial development, we're similar to the Hido. You need to step way back from the Hido.
Right, that sort of thing. We can-
Yeah, I'll be going. Because I might get to a point where, man, I really don't understand what Bill needs, and I got down some details, so I might be calling you.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so
The next
two of us
question.
have, yeah, two of us have voiced an opinion. There's three more than alternate.
I was not,
I think
You do want something.
no, I don't want some. I think we need to put something together to do something with the heavy industrial part.
Okay.
But
But you are not in favor of zoning at this point.
At this point, with all of this, no.
What that looks like.
No, I'm
Yeah, I
not.
don't think none of us like it, the way it looks now, but I guess, previous question. Do we want the decision making with the zoning or do we not?
Mhm.
I would rather us have a decision making, so if that translates to zoning, then you're right, zoning.
Well, and that's the reason we're going around to get a consensus. What you want.
To stop the heavy industry going, I mean, or to slow it down, or to, to have a say in yes or no, whether it's done or not. You gotta have something. Okay, now, I'm not for all this. This is a start of a workup to get to that point. Okay. And that's what I think I've heard at the 2 meetings I've been to, is we want to
I think more
say,
people agree with Bill's, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think more people agree with Bill's plan that he's got to hold up.
right,
That,
but you
that,
don't
that
have proper
comes,
zoning.
that comes closer to meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
Than any of this.
Right, but you're gonna have to call this snow camp zoning instead of ordinances to be able to stop it.
It's pretty much, this is my own household. seems like.
Okay.
It
I
is
didn't
gonna
know
have to
if
be
we
called
were
zoning.
sold this and Tanya just
It's
gotta
not.
write it up and ready to
Right,
go,
I
or
mean,
how
I-
this is.
I
I
don't
going.
like
don't know, I don't know if I'd share it out. I mean, it's just, like I said last week, it's just talking points to start a conversation or something more simplified and easier to deal with.
So we don't have a draft to share, period, at this
Yeah, I-
point, whether we write this up or
Right,
not,
yeah,
when we get that
that's-
ready, we'll share.
That's right. That's-
Cause I think we
somebody
would probably
that's smarter
confuse
than me.
people more right now sharing.
Yeah, but it's common,
Scratch
it's
it.
common sense.
Right.
Common sense is where that came from. And that's not being extra restrictive, in my opinion, on either side.
But to be, like right now with the, I don't know, if they just check the boxes, they can come no matter what.
To enforce it, yes.
But it's gotta be called zoning to stop it,
So, okay, so.
from what I'm hearing.
What I'm hearing too.
It's gotta be called zoning to have a way to stop it.
Come up with something that give us one side or the other, which based on my criteria.
First, depends on how many hours I need to sleep.
Uh,
So, when would y'all like to meet? Cause
Are
you
we
got,
gonna meet
planning board's
next
meeting
week?
Thursday night.
We got a regular meeting next
We
week.
got a regular meeting next week. Do we-
I can meet with y'all at 6 and we do the regular meeting at 7, or we can do it on a different day, or not do next week at all.
I won't be out of town.
You gonna leave
Well,
The whole
So
week.
you can come with Thursday
my
night. either.
consensus on
I'll be
that
back Thursday midday. I should be here Thursday.
Do you want to voice your opinion, Sandy?
Sure. I mean, I'm a county resident and I mean, I don't want anybody, I have a hard time imposing something on somebody else that I don't want myself. So I struggle with that. What I would like to see is something, because in that meeting, that was the one thing when Mr. Willoughby asked that question. Some want zoning, some don't, but the one thing that they wanted was who doesn't want protection against, or a voice in class 3 industrial when it comes to our area. And not one person raised their hand. So I think that, like Eric said, is the common ground. So mold this to a bare minimum. But then I think we need to push it back to the snow camp people and let them weigh in. Because I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I think we need to have another public hearing down there.
I just think, I
Once
think
we
now,
get it all
We've
together.
had some discussions on once y'all get done with it, then what do we do? So what consistency to be, at least from the commissioner level, is to do one of the workshops where we pull both boards back together again, do the presentation of what we came up with. And at that time, kind of see how everybody feels. And between those times, people will be talking to others in the community and we'll release a draft after that meeting. And then we can go back and have another meeting, kind of sneak in as well. Whatever we want to do, there's budgets and times for that, as long as we're timely in our process. Now that, the only reason I say that is if we want to get this done before the moratorium expires, legal does not feel comfortable that more than 3 months after that February 28th would be legal for us to do again. So it would die then and expire, and that would allow some type of heavy industrial application to come in under current ordinances, because this wouldn't be done, and we could put ourselves susceptible to an issue that we've already had at one time. Feel a little bit different, but has the same repercussions.
When's the moratorium expected?
So it expires February 28th,
February 28th.
but their February 20th meeting of commissioners are going to, or plan to extend that moratorium. We're arranging for the public hearing and everything to do it legally, and they can only extend it 3 months.
I would see us have. Anything that I voted on by 28.
Oh, no, that's why.
No, we're not, we're not trying to rush that, no.
Yeah.
That's why there's 3 months to
Yeah.
get this worked out. If it's gonna get worked out.
Right.
Well, like you said, there's some support for some basic things. We're just trying to get to what are these basic things.
It's the class 30 or the heavy industrial.
Because class 3s have mixed support. Some want them okay, maybe, and some don't yet. But we may have to follow somewhere down the road.
But if there's a way to have it. So we're not, so like the good, like the stuff that would be beneficial, we want the jobs. That stuff, I mean, there's a way to, just to give them a voice of what's coming. I think would be nice, but I think, not that we want to rush it, but I do think that the people in that community are ready to know. We're ready for some closure or some a definitive answer, something, just for the peace of mind. Because I mean, I know that's stressful for them too. You're going through this process. But
Well, it's been a 2-year process from the beginning of getting the long range plan done to be able to get to this point. So I would think that with all the efforts, citizens and everybody's been involved, it would be something that we'd like to see. Come to this. But so I'm still stuck on when all this ready.
We're just trying to get together just before the planning board meeting, just to see if there's anything that we could share, or do we want to just give it 2 weeks and do it the next?
are we doing that second?
I was gonna do that. So I'm tired of looking.
What day?
It might actually is
In the 24th.
I think it's 24th is what Tim was saying. It's-
That also gives us public.
No,
comment
you're talking
sections.
about meeting, you're not planning on talking about it, it's planning board meeting, but when the steering committee would meet is when I need to have something ready for before we meet.
But like we'll have public comments at the planning board meeting next week on the 10th. And then if we, that may give us some more direction,
That's
some more insight.
That's where we're
Where
moving down
the
there,
where
so
some
whoever
people
wants
are
to
right
be
now.
okay.
And then
I said we just wait.
give us
till the
direction
next
on the
week.
24th.
So what they're gonna be commenting on the original draft. that everybody
Exactly,
was ready to
exactly.
burn up.
Yeah, it would be,
Yeah, we'll-
So
But that's
we
when
can
y'all
decide.
can come back and explain how you don't have to be,
No.
there's no definitive answer on what y'all discussed, just that you've discussed multiple sections in here.
Well, and there's been a bunch took out.
Yeah, that draft's not out for anybody, because it's not really a draft, it's
Right.
merely a scratch, so. But so, not next week.
Yeah, I'm not available for the meeting. That's the little guy's last basketball game. And like I said, we can get paid for this.
I mean, and
So I
Eric's
wanna
gonna be
miss the
traveling
little
to
guy.
midday that day, so.
But I can do something earlier if we need to do that. On 6 o'clock, I'm free to watch the little guys game right here in Graham. In Graham, we're good.
this is non-public documents. So we can't talk about.
Y'all can discuss with people ideas and stuff, the actual document would probably create more chaos to release right now than anything else.
Can I
Because
ask
this
you a
is
question?
broken pieces.
Is that legal that she can't, share that Levi, is that legal?
Well, so this is not a final document for release, it's
Well,
really
this
just a
was-
scratched
I'm
up
not
document.
I'm not here to argue, but this ain't final document. There's no way-
That was a
released.
release draft, yeah.
There's not much to difference, it was released, it's not a final document. I'm just making understand.
It's a final draft, yeah.
Illegal or not. That's what it is.
That's what I.
No, I'm saying that actually was legally released. This is not even a draft. This is just a scratch up.
A working document is
It's
still
the
a public
same
record.
thing that
It's
y'all
public
got.
record.
A
It's
working
just
document
ideas that they're working with right now. There's nothing. that's
is still a
really
public record.
ready to be
Where'd you
released.
get it at?
Hey, this gentleman.
I'm just saying that a working document is still a public record.
That's what.
But it's not even a working document.
Yes.
If we're talking about Mr. Poe's ideas, those aren't a working
It's
document.
real confusing for anybody looking at a document right now. And in the past, we haven't in these stages released anything. not to hide anything, like I said, it's confusing, it's mess.
Can we share, I didn't mean to ask like one question.
You can share anything you want to.
Bill's,
rendition.
Bill's idea.
the reason I'm asking is what can we share or is because we're starting to get a lot of emails and I'd like to respond to them. But I don't want to respond with anything that would be inappropriate or that I can't share. So I just kind of want to know what my parameters are.
Well, so
But I'm
we'll be bouncing
responding to
off
people.
legal tomorrow and see what they say.
You
Like I
can
said,
share
previously,
anything.
they haven't actually released any of this. We've gotten a good, clear draft ready for people. So there isn't so much confusion, because like I said, this is just, it's a bit of a mess. Things aren't put together. There'll be more questions than answers because we're not at that point yet. But we'll see what, practical is.
So I guess 2 points are we gonna continue to chip away at lining through the other stuff? Or we're just gonna put a pin in that and start developing?
We'll do these two.
Well, so the zoning ordinance itself has the basic parameters that legally we have to have in there, so you're gonna continue to see some of that stuff, because that's what we have to have. But you're gonna see some of the other stuff come out and these other pieces.
Go in, okay.
But the general format, I guess, the general structure is gonna look like the ordinance that's presented.
We're gonna get to about 10 pages.
We might have a little bit more than that, just to get all the details in there of the enforcement and all that stuff and definitions, but, it's gonna be small.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So I have to have districts, zoning uses, the decision making, the enforcement, and the appeal. So those are the 5 key components.
Yeah, the administrative part on the very front, who has the powers and control, and who's supposed to administer the ordinance, all that stuff has to be in there too.
Thanks.
A lot of it would just say, yeah, it's Tommy's problem.
68 pages or not, all over mine, so.
She started.
So between your board, district board, y'all set the policy. and I. Did we decide on these? Because I don't feel like I wrote that.
Okay. Are we gonna meet next Thursday at 6 o'clock before the regular planning board meeting, just to see if she has anything together, or do we give her 2 weeks to get something together? I wouldn't mind, not pushing work, but I wouldn't mind having some of that to look at, just so when we go to, if it's gonna be, we're gonna get a lot of public comments then an hour later, just so we can, jot those notes down.
Why don't we do a Solomon compromise here? You get us something on paper for next week that we can get before the meeting.
How far before?
Well,
Okay. I better wrap it up then, I'm saying.
we picked up 8:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
So we got that document, and that gives us then a meeting to listen to the comments and a week to read through what she got marked up, and then we come back on the
24th.
17th
The 17th or something.
for this session.
Yeah.
So y'all want to continue to meet on the first one?
I think so.
Well, wait a minute. When is the Farm Bureau? Do y'all meet the third tonight?
Yeah, it would,
For the 17th?
I don't know, I just think it's gonna be the 24th.
So y'all don't have a schedule.
24th.
Okay.
I hadn't got anything from her this week, normally she sends it out for her.
Okay.
When could you comfortably have us something, say, pick up to read? Cause I mean, I'm kind of like Eric. I'd much rather have it on that paper in front of me and I can read through it 3 or 4 times instead of trying to scroll through the computer.
So I think like Tuesday or Wednesday next week, I could have something.
Do y'all feel like we need to meet before the meeting?
I
Well,
think it'd be okay.
Just see if we get it, if we have any questions, just so we're on the same page.
Yeah, y'all can tell me that's not at all what we thought that would look like, or, okay, but we need to tweak something.
Okay.
Make it fit.
6 o'clock.
All right, well, I've got no
And
problem.
Anthony can't be here at 6. He'll be here at 7, so, and then he can swing by and pick up his copy, and then
Yeah, so that'd be,
You don't
I'll
know.
pick up a copy.
we'll just have to draw it for us.
I'm sure with his home-based business, he has a computer in his house.
It ain't, that one ain't covered. It wouldn't take me.
Yeah, it ain't colored. I like
It makes a
seeing
difference.
red.
between color.
I'm just sliding straw through.
That's why
Well,
I
you're
left
not
my-
gonna see a lot of yellow, because I'm adding things. that he said.
That's why I left mine in this folder here, because it ain't got these colors on it. But
Color.
we're down to 47 days. If you look at all that's marked through it, 47.
68.
As long as,
I mean, if I actually hit delete, I think you'd be done.
yeah, we'll be down about 47. That's close. Good deal, that sounds good.
Y'all just want me to email you when I get ready to see.
Yeah, you just email me when you get ready, and I'll come
Okay.
pick it up. I'll come pick it up.
I mean, if I need to inquire about a delivery service, y'all let me know.
I'll find me a color parent printer. I'll use, my wife's downstairs. I think it's storage.
All right,
Tell
so
her
you've
about
got
that.
2 home-based businesses at your place. So is there some restriction against 2 home-based businesses? at one place?
Well, we got
We
two.
don't have zoning stuff.
I'm on,
He's not.
I'm gonna have to
You're in
excuse
TJ, right?
myself.
You're in
No,
TJ, you're
I'm
in-
in.
No, he's not even-
Are you in a subdivision?
I am in
Your
subdivision.
restrictions let you do that?
My restrictions let me do whatever I want.
He must have wasn't saying.
Now, it didn't let me do what was behind me, or do what I want to do what was behind me, but in my subdivision, we can, well, I take it back, no, because there's homeowners, not a,
Restricted codes.
yeah, there you go, restricted covenants that don't allow for the anything. But we as 13 residents will have to enforce it. We can take money. They lost around the neighbor.
You never know. You never know.
It's like saying that she was our resident, really.
That's right.
She knows nothing.
We do have that in place, which is kind of like this, but. Sound good to me?
Restricted covenants can be a real pain in the butt, or they can be really simple.
They can be protective and they can be restricted. depending on where you-
That's right.
how you look at it.
Well, and then that's what zoning is too. It can be restricted or it can be protected. It's just.
But you choose to live in subdivision.
All right, y'all, I'll work on